Yeah, Grace Point. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad you're with us today. How are y'all doing today? You're good? Come on, let's stand up. Let's all sing together. You'll learn this song real quickly. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a big, deep breath. Let it out. Breathe in this peace. You are here. You're loved. You are welcomed. You are affirmed. You're celebrated. Thank you so much for being with us today here at Grace Point. Yeah. Here we go. Go on, lay your troubles down. Set your feet on solid ground. Peace deep as I have found. I want to follow you. Come on, all you weak and weary. Come round now if you can hear me. Poor, sick, and God-fearing. I want to follow you. I said I want to follow you. Hey, leave all of your trouble. Leave all of your sorrow. Sit down your burden. Come on and follow. Come on, heavy laden. Don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Go on, leave your worries too. Not a bit of good they do. There's a word that's coming through. Go on, leave your worries too. So I call your name in the middle of the night. I want to know, can you hear my cry? June heat and moonlight. Yeah, I want to follow. I said I want to follow. Come on, sing it. Leave all of your trouble. Leave all of your sorrow. Sit down your burden. Oh, come on.
Come on and follow.
Come on, heavy laden. Don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Oh, yeah, that's right. Set your burdens down. Set your burdens down. Set your burdens down. Come on, y'all sing. Leave all of your trouble. Leave all of your sorrow. Sit down your burden. Come on and follow. Come on, heavy laden. Don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow. One more time, come on. Come on, all you people. Come on and follow.
Hey, Grace Point family. My name is Corey Dandridge, and I hail from a small town outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm honored to be your virtual gathering host. Or as Ricky Bradley would say, I'm your virtual bishop. But we all know in the online church that Jessica B is the true bishop. If you want to know what we're talking about, come on out to Reconstruct on Wednesday nights, and you'll learn why we call Jessica B our online bishop. But we just want to extend a great welcome to all those that are in person, to all those that are viewing from around the country, and to all those that are viewing from around the world. We're happy that you joined us today. And we're just excited about what God is going to do in your life through the service. We will be taking communion later on, and I just want to make sure those that are in person that you picked up your communion cup, and for all those that are viewing online that you prepare your elements. We're excited. I hope you're excited. I hope you're pumped for what God is going to do today. Please continue to enjoy the service.
Yeah, let's hear it for Bishop Corey Dandridge. Yeah. Thank you, Corey. I know he's watching. What we want to do is right now we want to give you an opportunity to greet all the people that you haven't seen in a week or in a very long time, or some people that you've actually never met. So if you want to find somebody to your comfort level, we've got the wristbands. Green is go, yellow is let's do a fist bump, and red is let's just wave. So find somebody, talk to them, introduce yourself. I've got another bottle. I think I'll be good. Where have you been? Why are you afraid? Tell me, my friend, what can I say? I can see that you're still hurting. Let me take some of that burden. Oh, bring your faults, bring your fears, dream your dreams and cry your tears. Every wrong, every right, all your peace and all your fights. Oh, my dear, don't you see? You were born to be wild and free, so don't hide your scars. Show us who you really are. Ready or not, you weren't made to hide. I know it gets hot standing in the spotlight, but you don't need to be picture perfect, and we don't need an edited version. So bring your faults, bring your fears, dream your dreams and cry your tears. Every wrong, your dreams and cry your tears. Every wrong, every right, all your peace and all your fights. Oh my dear, don't you see, you were born to be wild and free. So don't hide your scars, show us who you really are. Don't you hide a single scar, show us who you really are. Yeah. We're going to hear from Corey with a few announcements. Let's listen.
We just want to remind you that we have 2 in-person service times now, 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. GP Kids and GP Youth are offered at our 10:30 service, and our online service times are live streamed at 10:30 a.m. If you are an in-person visitor, we'd love for you to grab a Connect card, fill it out, and let us know that you were here. Please also make sure to visit our website, gracepoint.net, to stay connected to the events that we offer during the week. We offer Reconstruct twice a week now, Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. and Wednesday evening at 6:30 p.m. And by way of special announcement, we have Books and Brews this week, Tuesday, June 22nd at 8 p.m. The book is entitled Transforming: The Bible and the Lives of Transgender Christians by Austin Harkey. Also this Saturday coming, June 26th at 6 p.m., we're hosting a house show with Trey Pearson. We'll be posting the details and the address on our Grace Point community Facebook page, so please be sure to keep an eye out if you're interested in going. And last but not least, it is impossible to do what we do on a weekly basis without your giving. So there are 2 ways to do that. You can text Grace Point with an E to 77977, or by going to our website, gracepoint.net/give. Again, thank you for coming today. We hope you will enjoy the rest of this service.
Hopefully everybody has the communion cups. If you don't, I'm sure we can get those to you. We're going to move into a time of communion, and there's something that we all like to read together as a community before we take communion, just to make sure everybody knows that all of us, when we come to this table, we're on the same page. Everyone is invited. No one is required, but all are invited to participate. We just want to make sure you know that. So let's read all this together. Come to this table, you who have much faith, and you who struggle with believing, you who have been here often, and you who have come for the first time, you who are at peace, and you who feel despair. We are all part of the human family, and there is a place for us here. Christ invites everyone to the table. May this bread and wine unite us all. Feel free to partake.
Hi, Grace Point. Hi. Are we not talking to each other? Is that good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are so thrilled you're here. Those of you who are joining us online and our virtual community, we're so thrilled that you're here with us. Can we welcome our virtual community? So just a few things before we get going. You heard that, first of all, the song that was just sang up here, that's a Ricky Brady original. So I don't know where he went, but that is a Ricky original. He's disappeared, but he wrote it. It's incredible. There he is over there. Thank you, Ricky, so much. You heard on the announcements that we're going to be hosting Trey Pearson next week. Trey will be here on Sunday morning and doing a house show on Saturday night. How many of you heard of the band or knew the band Everyday Sunday back in the late 90s, early 2000s? So Trey, that's Trey's band. Trey came out about 5 years ago and has been writing new music and touring, and so he'll be here on Sunday morning to do a song. But on Saturday night, the announcement said 6. It's been changed to 7. So if you'd like to come, go to the Grace Point Facebook group. If you're not a part of that, ask to join, answer the questions, and we'll get you plugged in there, and we would love to have you. It's called the Safe Space Tour, so you can also find it on Trey Stuff. But it's going to be so much fun. Hope you'll consider being with us. And then two more things I wanted to talk about before we jump into the sermon. Yesterday was the first time that Juneteenth was a federal holiday, which is fantastic, right? So good, such an important step, but I think we also have to recognize that as important as that is, and as wonderful as that is to have that as a holiday, it's not the totality of the work. We have so much more work to do. We have work to do that is systemic. We have work to do that is economic, because they say where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And if our heart is going to be centered on justice, then we have to end up spending our money as a country in ways that do repair to the damage that has been done. And so we have so much work to do. But yet we can also take those little moments of what feels like just almost unthinkable a long time, just those moments, and celebrate the good in them. And so I hope that felt like a step forward, because it is. It's just not all the steps we need to take. And then today is a day here in the U.S. Known as Father's Day, and it's a day that brings up a lot of stuff for a lot of people. It's multi-layered, it's complex, and so we just wanted to take a minute and acknowledge that today, that there are those of you in this room right now, and you are full of joy and celebration and sentimentality and all good things. There are those of you in this room right now who are hurting, who are reflecting on loss and grief and maybe some anger and all of those things. And all of it, there's space for all of it here. So we just wanted to say, wherever you are and whatever this day brings up for you, we see you, we love you. There's space for all of the emotion and all of the feelings that you have today. And to those of you who embody masculine energy in a way that is not toxic and in a way that is not patriarchal, we are grateful for you and for the gifts you bring into the world. So thank you so much for what you do and what you embody and who you are. All right, you ready for a sermon? All right. It's early. Let's wait and see how this goes. Youth, you can go. So, we are exploring these things called Beatitudes. And these Beatitudes of Jesus are not what maybe we had traditionally or culturally been thought. When you hear the word blessed, we talked about this last week. When you hear the word blessed, there are all sorts of things that pop up for us that probably weren't popping up for Jesus when he was declaring groups of people blessed. Right? When we hear blessed, we think of successful, we think of powerful, we think of wealth, we think of everything up and to the right. And when Jesus begins to speak blessings on groups of people, he does so to people who traditionally would have been left out of any sort of blessing. Right? When Jesus begins to proclaim who's blessed, he begins with the poor and the poor in spirit. When Jesus wants to speak about who's blessed, he talks about those who are mourning. When Jesus starts announcing who's blessed, he says, blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the earth. When he talks about who's blessed, he says, blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for justice, but justice has been denied to them. These are not the traditional categories of people. Jesus, in these Beatitudes, he's turning blessing on its head. He's asking us to rethink what blessing is. And if you were here last week, we adopted sort of this definition, that to be blessed in the Sermon on the Mount, in the Beatitudes, is a way of saying God is with you. God is on your side. To the poor in spirit, God is with you. God is on your side. To those who are grieving and mourning, God is with you. God is on your side. To those who are hungry and thirsty for justice, and again and again and again and again, that justice has been denied to you. God is with you. God is on your side. Jesus is inviting us to see a brand new perspective on what it means to be blessed. Now, I just have to imagine, and this is probably not true, but in my imagination, there's always somebody in the crowd, and Jesus is going off, and he finishes who's blessed, and then somebody raises their hand, and they say, Jesus, no, all lives are blessed. Because there's always one in every Facebook group, right? There's always one in every Facebook chat or Twitter or wherever. There's always somebody who's going to say, no, all lives are blessed, Jesus. I think the point Jesus is making is, no, they're not. All lives aren't blessed. And these groups of people, in these real circumstances that he's announcing blessing to, he's saying, These are people who've been left out of blessing for a very, very, very long time. And because they have been excluded from blessing, we are now announcing that to be blessed, to have God on your side in this moment means that you are poor in spirit, or that you are poor, or you are mourning, or you are hungry and thirsty. These Beatitudes are not invitations for privileged people to find ways to become more privileged. Right, which is the way I think so many of us were. I talked to somebody after 9 o'clock, and they're like, "This is exactly how we've been taught to read them. They're statuses to attain. If you want to if you want to level up your spirituality, well, you got to become poor in spirit. You got to mourn. You got to be hungry and thirsty for justice." And so we begin to try to figure out how we can fit ourselves into those categories, because what do we want more than anything? Just more. Just more. More blessing, more privilege, more. And these are not avenues to getting more. They are announcements to people who have been excluded, forgotten, and left out that God is with them. And that regardless of what they've heard or how they've been told the world works, and this is what it means to have God on your side, that you continually climb the ladder. No, this is God's announcement of witness for those and with those who have been left out of God's witness forever. And so what does it mean to be a person like me approaching the Beatitudes? I think here's what it means. I think it means that I am called to be a channel of that blessing. I am called to be an embodiment of God's witness for people. We are called to stand in solidarity with the poor in spirit. How will they know they're blessed? When somebody comes alongside them and stands with them. To stand in solidarity with those who mourn, with those who are meek, with those who are forgotten, with those who are persecuted, so that they'll know they're not alone. And today I want to look at the second Beatitude, and it's one that when you first hear it, there's, at least internally, you'll groan a little bit, because you're like, this is what we're going to talk about today? I was in a good mood before I came to church. And this is the Beatitude, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Blessed are those who mourn. I tried to imagine myself saying this phrase to somebody who was mourning. Like going beside their hospital bed and saying, "Oh, you're so blessed." Or standing with them alongside a casket and announcing blessing to them. It just seems so off, doesn't it? It seems kind of tone deaf. It seems like, how in the world can we even begin to talk about people who are mourning and grieving, who've lost? How can we begin to even think about calling them blessed? And yet this is the second Beatitude out of the gate. This is what Jesus does. I think we have to begin by just acknowledging that there's an awkwardness that happens when we don't know what to say to somebody who's grieving, and we tend to end up saying the worst thing we could possibly imagine. Anybody found yourself in that situation before? Listen, as a young pastor, as a medium pastor, and I hope less now that I'm becoming whatever an older pastor might be. But early on in my ministry, I would go to hospitals and make visits. And when I didn't know what to say, the first thing I would say to the person in the hospital bed, "How you doing?" "I'm in the hospital," right? I even found myself in the line at a funeral home once, not knowing what to say to somebody and going, "How are you?" And then if you've ever done this, you know the next thing that happens is you begin screaming inside your head, "Take it back, take it back, take it back, take it back, take it back." And you can't take it back. When the words are out there, they are gone. Sometimes we don't know what to say, so we just say cliches, right? Anybody ever been cliched in a bad moment, or been like the cliche giver in a bad moment? Here's one. When God closes a door, she opens a window. Don't act like you know what that means, because nobody knows what that means. What in the world might it mean? We're supposed to jump out the window? Is that maybe she closed the door for a reason? You shouldn't go through it. Maybe we just wait and see if the door opens up again later. I mean, like, what are we supposed to do? It's this cliche that's existed in Christian circles forever, but it really doesn't make sense. And then there's this one, time heals all wounds. How many of you ever said it? How many ever had it said to you? It is partially true and partially false. Because in my experience with human beings over a long period of time, people, yes, time does provide a little bit of a softening of pain. It can bring some healing. But the reality is there are still moments, no matter how long it's been, there are still moments, anniversaries, big milestones, and those sorts of things that become, it's almost like it's fresh again. My grandfather has almost been passed for 30 years. And I call my grandmother every year because the anniversary of his passing and his birthday are 8 days apart. I call her on both. And some years, that conversation is just fond and reminiscing. And there are some years, even almost 30 years on, that she's experiencing it in some ways as if it had just happened, if she's reliving it in a way. And that's how pain works. So can time heal all wounds? Maybe not all. Can time soften? Yeah, it can. But we also, there's this awareness we need to have that sometimes the things we thought we were past, the things we thought we had moved on from, those sorts of things, we actually aren't moved on from them, and they aren't past, and they keep popping back up, sometimes with a freshness that is alarming and troubling because we weren't expecting it. And then there's this one, make sure to keep busy. Make sure to keep busy. Just whatever you do, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't take 5 minutes to think about your feelings. Whatever you don't take a minute to actually reflect on what's happened to you. Just keep busy. I can remember, how many of us when we were kids and we were told to pick up our room, we just threw it all under the bed? Anybody ever do that? You don't even throw it under the bed, Cohen. You just pretend like it's not there and we can't see it. There's this general, if we just sweep it under the rug and if we pretend it's not there, then it's not there. We just won't deal with the elephant in the room. But the reality is that even when you, eventually, if you sweep it under the rug, there's going to be a hump in the rug. And it's going to become something that you cannot not deal with. Ultimately, the body keeps the score. And you can try to ignore it and you can try to push it off and you can try, but these feelings don't disappear. They're in a better place. That's whatever your beliefs about that are, and I'm sure we could have a rousing debate on that in this room. Whatever your beliefs on that are, there are moments when that's just not helpful, is it? Because I'm not in a better place. I'm here and now, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I'm going through. So this idea of just kind of pushing it away and not dealing with it is actually deeply unhealthy. God needed another angel. Just never say that. I'm not often very prescriptive. Just don't say that to another human being. It's theologically terrible, and it's just mean to say to another human being. We can't be sad because they're better off now. I had a friend when I was a young pastor, a guy in our church who had lost his grandmother, and they were really close. And so I said to him on that Sunday morning, I didn't ask him how he was doing. You'll be pleased to know that I was ahead of the curve. I just said, how are you? I know you've gone through such a deep loss, and we're thinking about you all. And he was just like, oh, no. I'm fine. You know why? Because she's happy. She's better off. But I knew the process leading up to this moment, he was wrecked. And now suddenly there's this switch that has been flipped. And I can't be sad because to be sad would somehow not be faithful or would somehow diminish what she has experienced. And I think these cliches are, you can see why people use them. Some of them, there's a sliver of something that might have been a thing at one point in time, but now the way we use them, what it really is trying to do is trying to mitigate awkwardness. And what it reveals is that we have not been taught how to grieve culturally. We have not been taught how to grieve. We have not been taught how to process pain, loss, trauma, any of those things. And when I was younger, I grew up in the Appalachian region of Kentucky and West Virginia. I remember going to a wake. You know what a wake is, right? I remember going to a wake as a kid and thinking, this is really, I don't know why we're doing this. This feels strange. But I also remember seeing people process their feelings. And I remember seeing people grieve together in a way. And we just haven't been taught to grieve. I love these words from John W. James at the Grief Resource Recovery Handbook. He says, we are taught how to acquire things, not what to do when we lose them. And that could be, maybe if you want to define one of America's biggest problems, is we have been taught culturally how to acquire and acquire and acquire and acquire. And give ourselves the sense that this is never gonna, there's nothing out there, this is never gonna end, we're just gonna keep acquiring until we keep acquiring. And the reality is that's not how the world works. Loss is part of life. Mourning is part of life. And I actually think that's something for all of our differences as human beings, across all different areas that we might have difference. I think one of the things that is true for all of us is that we all experience the need to mourn. We all have a deep need for mourning. And I don't mean, like, sometimes I think we mistake mourning for, like, inconvenience, or we mistake grief for, like, just our privilege being stepped on a little bit. Or how many of you have ever known somebody who got really distraught over a sporting event? Yeah, and how many of you were that person? And, you know, like right now, like, so let me tell you, when I was, I'm a West Virginia football fan. 2007, we were one game away from playing for the national championship for the first time since the 80s, second time in our history, big deal. And I brought some friends over. I'd prepared, like, we were playing our arch rival Pitt, and we were a 4-touchdown favorite. And I was already, like, polishing our trophy. Like, I was ready for this. We lost 13-9. And I brought all these people over to watch it happen. And it was just god-awful and miserable. And I was in a bad mood for like 2 years after that. Like, I just kept saying, like, you know what? I'm never gonna open my heart up again to a sports team. I'm done with this. But every August, I'm like, I'm ready to be hurt again. You know what I mean? Like, but like, there was just this anger in me that was disproportionate to, like, everybody was safe, everybody was healthy, everybody was okay. And yet there was I'm not talking about that. Like, that's got its own category of whatever. But human beings need to grieve. We need it. And the reason I say we share in common the need is because we don't share in common, like, knowing what to do or how to do it, or even recognizing that the need is present. Because for so many of us, if you were raised in a religious context, it's almost like being impervious to grief and suffering and pain was a spiritual badge of honor. Anybody have that experience where your level of spirituality could be ascertained by how nothing affected you and how you were just so strong, and no matter what happened, I won't shed a tear because I trust the plan of God, right? And in all of that, we were never taught, okay, whatever, your feelings matter, and what you're going through is affecting you. It's left a wound, because grief always leaves a wound. And maybe you should spend some time thinking about it. Maybe you should see a therapist. Maybe you should go through a process with your trauma. Maybe there are all these steps you could take that would help you enter into the grieving process in a really healthy way. There's a story in the Gospel of John where Jesus, a friend of his named Lazarus, is sick. And when Jesus is told, and he's not just told, hey, your buddy's sick, but when they tell Jesus Lazarus is sick, they use this language: Lord, the one you love is sick. Now, think about what that imparts. This is not just a casual friendship. This is somebody with a deep bond. And so Jesus travels back, and when he gets back to Bethany, where the family lived, he discovers Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. And I know for those of you who know the Bible and you know the story, you know what happens. They roll away the tomb. Jesus says, come out. Lazarus shimmies out in his grave clothes, and it's a big, big celebration moment. But I don't think we should skip. I think we should pause in the middle where when Jesus gets the information, he goes to the tomb, and it's what is often called the shortest verse in the Bible. It's 2 words in the King James. It's 3 words in Greek, because I don't know how they got it shorter, but they did. And it's just real simple. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Where does this notion come from? That to be truly spiritual and truly, really to trust God fully, and all the religious language we might use for that, where does this notion come from that to do that means shutting off your emotions, shutting off your feelings, ignoring your grief, ignoring your pain, ignoring your suffering? Because if that's somehow a Christian value, it isn't something Jesus seemed to value very much. Because throughout the stories in the Gospels, we find a Jesus who is very in touch with his emotions. We find a Jesus who is laughing and full of joy. We find Jesus sometimes, like if you dig in and understand the idiom of the day, he's kind of funny, actually. He's got his moments where it's like, that guy's funny, he should do stand-up, right? And then you find Jesus in these other moments where Jesus is just grief-stricken. You find him in Gethsemane before the crucifixion, weeping as if sweating drops of blood. You find a human being who fills the whole human spectrum of emotion. Where does this idea come from that to be really, really spiritual is somehow to ignore our pain and trauma and mourning, when Jesus invites us headlong into it? And so as we think about that, just a few things I want to say about mourning. And I want to begin with this. Mourning really does look different for everyone. It really does. And I know what we often want to do is we want to assume how everybody else should mourn based on how it works for us. Right? The worst thing we can do to another human being in a time of grief and tragedy is to put more shoulds on them and to shame them. Right? So if somebody's not grieving the way I would or the way you would, yes, there are really unhealthy ways to not grieve or to grieve. Like you can totally do that in an unhealthy way. But the reality is we all are going to process things differently. So I think giving ourselves the space to just because I'm not doing, and I've heard people do this before. Somebody will bring up, I did this, and somebody will be like, I didn't think you should have done that. What? It's none of your business. Let the person grieve. So shoulds and shame ultimately circumvent the process. And then I think there's a direct relationship between mourning and being comforted. You cannot have one without the other. In order to be comforted, you have to be mourning. They go together because ultimately grief that isn't acknowledged can't be processed. And grief that can't be processed can't begin to heal. Right? We don't just get to go from everything's fine, comfort me, to everything's fine, this happened, and now I'm in need of comfort. Mourning, comfort assumes the need for comfort. It assumes mourning. And this myth that somehow that's a lack of faith. No. God's comfort is God's witness in mourning. Comfort is how God is present in pain and suffering and loss, because ultimately mourning and comfort aren't opposite sides of the spectrum. It's not like mourning is over here and comfort is over here, and I'm just slowly trying to leave mourning behind so I can get to comfort. Actually, when we're mourning, we need comfort here, not down the road. When we're mourning, we need it now. We need a presence. We need someone to bring comfort to us in this moment because they happen side by side. They happen simultaneously. You don't leave one and pick up the other. It's a process, and they go together. They hold hands. I think it's interesting that when Jesus appears at the end of the Gospel of John, the reason they recognize him is because they see his scars. Right? The risen Christ, post-Easter Jesus in John, is known not by the radiance of his robe. That's clearly a risen dude. That's been bleached. No. They recognize Jesus because they see the marks. Because grief, loss, suffering, and mourning leave marks. And those things begin to heal over time. And there are things that can happen that rip them wide open and you're back as if you were in the moment. And the truth is, loss takes a chunk out of you. Grief takes a chunk out of you. Even the risen Christ has scars. And I think a church at its best, or really any community at its best, but in our context, a church at its best is a place where people can bring the fullness of their humanity to the table, the fullness of who they are. That means their joy, their celebration, all the goodness. And that means all the loss, all the pain, and all the hurt. I love what Paul says, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 12. He's describing the church, the community of Christ followers. He's describing them as the body of Christ because, like St. Teresa said, Christ has no body on earth but ours. And he says, if one part of the body suffers, all parts suffer with it. If one part gets the glory, all parts celebrate with it. You are the body of Christ and parts of each other. I love that he essentially says, humans are complex and we can hold together lots of different thoughts, feelings, and emotions. We can celebrate with those who celebrate. We can weep with those who weep. We can be angry with those who are angry. We can hold the whole thing. A church at its best is a place where people bring the fullness of their humanity, the fullness of their joys, their doubts, their questions, and even their pain. And I have to tell you, one of the lessons I'm learning as a parent is when one of my kids get hurt, my initial impulse is to try to stop the process before it starts. Any other parents do this? So they fall down, I know where this is going. They're going to scream for an hour. No, it's fine. You're fine. You're fine. It didn't leave a mark. Just get up and dust it off and rub some dirt on it and get back out there. Right? That's the thing, because I desperately don't want them to feel anything painful. And yet, their process of growing up and falling down, and that process involves a lot of joy and it involves a lot of tears, and it involves a lot of skinned knees, and it involves a lot of hurt feelings. It is an entire thing. And who am I to try to tell them how they should respond to the pain in their life? But so often, that's what we've done in church. We've put on this display as if we're bright, shiny, happy people who never have a problem. And the way you know that God loves us and that we're, part of the in-group and that we are blessed by God, the way you know that is we're always smiling, even when it's so big and plastic looking that it seems painful. We're going to smile, that big old smile, and we're going to put on like everything's fine because ultimately we're so #blessed and every day's a Friday and everything is good all the time because God loves us. God does love us. Everything is not good all the time. And a church must be a place where people can bring the totality and the fullness of who they are as human beings and find companions to carry the load. That's what I love about this word comfort. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The word comfort in Greek here is the word parakaleo. Can we say that together? Parakaleo. It's one of my favorite words to say. And it literally means to come alongside, to call to your side. To parakaleo is to be in the middle of something heavy and painful and difficult and say to the people around you, hey, I need you. I need some people I'm calling you over to I need your help. It's sort of what happens when you're on the road and you get a flat tire, right? And you realize you don't have anything that you need to take care of that flat tire and you're doing this. Anybody, I need somebody to come alongside me who can fix this, who can not even maybe even fix it, but can help me just do something with it. And that's what parakaleo is. It's just asking, please, come alongside me because I don't want to carry this alone. We have bought into this lie that it is a badge of honor to carry things on your own, to be independent, to not need other people, to I do this my way. And the reality is we are desperately in need of community. We are in need of people to parakaleo with us. We are in need of people to not only recognize, but to see us and to hear us, and who are willing to pick up their part of it and carry it down the road with us. Because what we can't do is we can't take away pain. I wish I could. I am a fixer at the core. Like when somebody starts telling me something that's wrong, I was like, well, we can figure this out. Let's go do this and do this and do this. Boom, it's done. And what I'm learning is that often when people come to me with that sort of thing, they're not going, hey, Mr. Know-It-All, fix this. What they're saying is, I just needed to be seen, and I just needed to know that what I was like, it was known, and that as I carry this, I'm not carrying it by myself. A church is a community of people who are parakaleoing for one another. It's a community of people who have gotten together. And all of our differences and all the things that make us unique, we have a shared need for community. We have a shared need for help in carrying the heaviness and the painfulness and the grief of life. And Jesus says, those who mourn, God is with them. How is God with them? God is with them because of all the people around them who parakaleo. My hope and my deepest hope for Grace Point is that this will be a community where nobody carries it alone. And you're not probably going to get to know everybody in this community. And I know there are probably going to be people at 9 o'clock if this is your regular gathering that you don't know. Yeah, there's all those things. But I hope that every single person in this room has at least a somebody or a couple somebodies who, when you are having the darkest, most difficult moments of your life, you know they've got my back. They're going to help me carry this. I am not on my own. They can't take it away. They can't minimize it or make it better. But they can at least make sure that I'm not dealing with this, processing this, carrying this, holding this, doing this all by myself. A church is a community of people who are signing up to be parakaleoers. Because I think that's how God always ends up being present. I think that's how God always ends up being present. You know, I'll tell you, in the difficult moments of my life, there have been people at some critical junctures who have really loved me well. Now, let me tell you what hasn't happened in any of my difficult moments. And if this has happened to you, great. A disembodied spirit has never floated down from the sky to tell me it's going to be okay. Not once. Morgan Freeman has never shown up to me, which is how I like to think about God. Has never shown up to me and said, it's going to be okay. But you know who has? Other human beings have shown up for me. Other human beings made sure I wasn't alone. Other human beings made sure that I felt seen. Other human beings came and picked up part of the load and helped me carry it. I think that's how God is always with us. That's why I think these Beatitudes are announcements to people in really unfortunate situations, that God is with them and has been with them the whole time. And they're also challenges to those of us who are not in those moments to come and be God's witness with people in those moments. This isn't a thing where you're like, okay, let's sit back and watch how the poor get blessed. You know how God's witness will be present to the poor? When we open up our wallets. Do you know how God's witness will be present with those who mourn? When we put our arms around them, when we pick up some of the grief and begin carrying it alongside them, when they know they're not suffering alone. How will people who are hungry and thirsting for justice know that God is with them? It is when those people like me of privilege decide I'm going to use whatever ability and voice I have to advocate and argue and insist on justice in this world. That's how will the persecuted know that God is with them? It's when people are willing to stand with them in their persecution. And by the way, we'll get into this in a bunch of weeks, but I'm not talking about Christians here because Christians are the ones doing the persecuting in the world most of the time. It's when people who, I want to make sure that the people who think God is somehow somewhere else with someone else knows God is with them, God is on their side, and the way they will know that is when I show up for them in a real, tangible, flesh and blood way. Now, how do we do that as a community? How do we make sure everybody in this room has a parakaleo? Because you need a parakaleo or two. I think there are lots of ways. We're going to be launching care groups again this fall. You'll be hearing more about that in the summer. We're going to have virtual care groups. We're going to have in-person care groups. And it's if you wonder what is a care group, it's right there in the name. It's brilliantly named. They're groups of people caring for each other, right? It's really, really super brilliant. And what happens in a care group? You get to be with people. They get to know you. They get to know your story. You're not somebody you bump into on a Sunday morning, but they actually get to know who you are. And they get to know what's going on in your life, and they get to figure out how they can best parakaleo with you because they're hearing your story in real time. And so maybe if that's a thing for you, you'll consider being a part of that. Another way to do that is through stuff like Reconstruct. One of the most incredible things that has happened watching it over the course of the pandemic has been the folks on Reconstruct who've been there every week, who have built this community where many of them are not even in Nashville. They're all over the world, and yet they have built this deep sense of parakaleo with one another. And so maybe it's you join something like that, and you hear stories, and you hear other people's doubts and questions, and you share yours, and you begin to piece together each other's lives and stories, and you're there for each other, and you care for each other. Maybe it's saying to somebody, hey, after church one Sunday, can we have Zoom lunch? Because I'm here and you're here, and it would take like 2 days to get to each other, but could we just like maybe pop a lean cuisine in the oven and sit down? And maybe that's not what you eat at your house, but and we sit down and or maybe it's saying to somebody in a gathering like this, hey, would you be interested? You may have plans this week, but could we plan a Sunday to go and have lunch after church? Because I'd just like to hear more of your story, and I would like to share a little bit of mine because I need some parakaleo in my life. And maybe there are all sorts of ways we've not even begun to dream of because you're dreaming of them. And you'll be like, hey, I have an idea to make sure nobody falls through the cracks, that nobody feels unseen, unheard, unloved. I want to make sure that nobody brings something in that somebody doesn't help them carry out. Are you with me? A church at its best blesses those who mourn because they're no longer mourning alone. But the people that make up that beautiful community, and you are a beautiful community, parakaleo the whole thing with them. My hope and prayer for Grace Point is that whatever we do well, whatever we don't do well, need to fix and improve, whatever, that at the core of our community will be a place where nobody's alone, where nobody's unseen, where nobody's unheard, where everybody has somebody's who says, okay, this is hard, it's difficult, it's heavy, it's painful, and we can't fix this for you. But we promise you, you will never carry it a step by yourself. That's a Jesus community. Let's pray. God, we recognize that in this room today, there are all sorts of different feelings, emotions. We're all processing something different. Some of us are filled with joy today. Some of us are filled with grief. Some of us are filled with questions and doubts. Some of us are filled with anger. Some of us are some sort of combination of all of that. May we parakaleo one another today. May we as a community commit to this journey of carrying the load for one another. May the thought of somebody grieving alone in this community of people, may it be unthinkable. Whether we're in this room right now, whether we're joining virtually, may we commit ourselves to this important work of being God's witness, of being the presence, the embodiment of the divine in the daily, in the grief, in the suffering, and in the hurt. May we bring the fullness of our humanity, the rawness of our humanity. And may we know that in this community, it can be held, it can be loved, and it will not be carried alone. We're grateful. Pray this in Jesus' name, and everybody said,
Amen.
Amen.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged, though I realize it's hard to keep courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness there inside you makes you feel so small. But I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful, like a rainbow. Show me a smile then, and don't be unhappy. Can't remember when I last saw you laughing. If this world makes you crazy and you've taken all you can bear, you call me up, because you know I'll be there. And I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful, oh, like a rainbow. I see your true colors shining through. See your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors, so beautiful. They're like a rainbow. Oh, yeah.
Let's hear it for Emily. and the band. Would you stand with me as you're able this morning? Thank you so much for being here. If you're here today and you have something you're carrying that you just don't want to carry alone, we want to make sure we see you, we hear you. We want to make sure you know that you're not alone. So please feel free to come grab me. Feel free to grab any of our other leaders around the room or the person next to you and be like, hey, you're perikleo in this whether you know it or not. Because that's what we long for this community to become. So good to be with you, Grace Point. Until next week, we love you. Grace and peace be with you. And don't forget, if you have kids and you're picking them up, you go this way.
Oh, leave all of your trouble, leave all of your sorrow, come on your burden, come on and follow. Come on, heavy laden, don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people, come on and follow. Oh, leave all of your trouble, leave all of your sorrow, set down your burden, come on and follow. Come on, heavy laden, don't wait for tomorrow. Come on, all you people, come on and follow. Oh, come on, all you people, come on and follow. Oh, God, yeah.
We both went for it.
Good job, y'all. Great job. Thank you. Y'all sounded amazing.
Every week, I don't know how we're gonna do it, and then every week we do it. It's like the two fish and the loaves. Like with